How is a broke federal government going to invest this much money to build a national grid?
Well, you know, the grid itself is not going to cost that much. The grid itself, it will probably cost about $250 billion to build a smart grid that reaches most of America, and that, you know, that can do the things that we need to do, like can send signals through the line, allow the utilities to send a signal through the line to turn off the hot water boilers in 1 million homes for 15 minutes in order to avoid the peak demand that is the most expensive part of our electrical system. If you eliminated peak, you save enough natural gas in our country to power the entire US passenger car fleet. So, and we can do that just by using the grid smartly. A grid that sends a signal to turn off all the electric toothbrush rechargers, you know, to turn off your swimming pool recirculators and all of these things. You don't care if somebody turns them off for 15 minutes and you sign something. It can go into your car and borrow the stored electricity in your car, in your battery, whether you got a plug-in hybrid or a plug-in car. And so we need to build a smart grid. That costs very little. About 4 months of the Iraq War, we have a whole national grid in this country. Then to build the generation for that grid will cost about, and I can tell you this, and let me give you an example that shows you how. Right now, one of our portfolio companies it's called BrightSource. And BrightSource is building the biggest power plant in America, which is in the Mojave Desert, and it's a solar thermal plant. This is not solar voltaic of the kind that your grandmother used to bolt to her roof. This is a mirror farm in the desert where they put a turbine on top of a tower, a giant scaffold, and they surround it by concentric rings of mirrors that are manipulated by computers to reflect sunlight onto that turbine. And 20 minutes after the sun comes up in the morning, that turbine's at 750 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a very efficient way of generating energy. We're building this plant in 3 years. Well, it takes 10 years to build a coal plant. We can build this in 3 years. It costs $3 billion a gigawatt to construct. That's the same price it costs to build a coal plant. It's 1/5 the price it costs to build a nuke plant. So, and once you build our plant, it's free energy forever, because the photons are hitting the Earth for free every day. All we have to do is construct the infrastructure to pick them up and put them in the line. Once you build that coal plant, now you got to go to the Appalachians, cut down the mountains, ship them across the country on rail yards, warp every rail in this country so we can't have a high-speed rail, burn the coal, poison every fish, kill 60,000 people a year, cause 10 million asthma attacks, you know, acidify the lakes and all the other costs. Once you build an oil plant for the same $3 billion, and remember ours is then free, once you build that oil plant, now you got to go to Saudi Arabia, punch holes in the ground, bring up the oil, refine it expensively, genuflect to the sheiks who despise democracy and are hated by their own people, get in periodic wars that cost us $3 trillion, escorted across the Atlantic with a military escort that Exxon doesn't pay for, you and I do. Then you spill it all over the Gulf, spill it all over Valdez, burn the oil, and poison everybody in our country. And so the big costs occur after you build the plant. Once you build our plant, it's free energy forever.
John Woolard,
let me just finish this. Let me finish this. He's talking too much. Let me just finish to answer your question to the math. Here's the math. We use 1,000 gigawatts in peak demand in our country. 500 of those, so that's what we got to replace. 500 of those are carbon-based. So that's what we really have to replace to have free energy. The others are nuke and hydro, et cetera, that are essentially free operation at this point. So 500 at 2% growth over the 50-year life of power plant, you have to double that. But you can cut it back in half by conservation, by building codes and, you know, and appliances, what we call negawatts, which are the cheapest form of energy. So conservatively, we have 1,000 gigawatts to replace. At $3 billion a gigawatt, which is what wind and solar cost, that is about $3 trillion, which is less than the cost of the Iraq War. So for less than the cost of the Iraq War, we can have free energy forever in this country. And then what happens? That's the biggest tax break that has ever occurred, and it's permanent, because the biggest cost to businesses and individuals in this country is our energy cost. And if you can eliminate those, which we can, then you suddenly have an advantage over the rest of the world in everything you produce, plus all the technological advantage that we get from incentivizing entrepreneurship and imagination and invention in order to construct and build this grid.